Today I am going to be reviewing a rather interesting whisky which comes from the White Mackay stable, and that is Shackleton's, which is based on an antique blend of McKinley's Rare Old Island malt whisky, which was the spirit supplied to the 1907 British Antarctic expedition. And the reason I'm reviewing this whisky today is not just because I enjoy it, though you can see I've done mostly the bottle, so I do very much enjoy it, but also because it gives me an excuse to plug my new book, A Dark History of Whisky, which is available now and can be getting anywhere the books are sold. That's A Dark History of Whisky by Gary Dobbs, which is published by Pen and Sword Books. The reason that there's a connection between my book and Shackleton's, or rather the new version, it shouldn't really call it that, but a blend that is based on an antique whisky that is McKinley's Rare Old Island malt whisky, is that the full story of how this whisky came about is actually one of the sections in this book, A Dark History of Whisky. Now, A Dark History of Whisky is a whisky book like no other, and there's two sections in this book which are titled Whisky Mixer, and that's difficult to say. Whisky Mixer. And these are a miscellaneous collection of whisky stories. And the story of how Shackleton's came to be is told fully in this book. I'm also going to be smoking a Peterson pipe, a silver spigot, with some swamp flower tobacco, which was a blend from GQ Tobaccos. They had to stop making this blend because they found with the draconian UK legislation which came in after the UK had left the EU. It was bad enough before we'd left the EU, but after it came in, the legislation got so bad that Glyn had to stop producing his own tobacco blends. This I've actually blended myself, because for a period GQ were able to supply the components parts of the tobacco to create this fabled swamp flower blend, and you had to blend it up yourself. Swamp flower is very heavy on Perique tobacco, and it's got a strong nicotine in it, so I'm just going to fill my bowl, and then we'll go back to the whisky. Now, as I say, Shackleton's, and I do like the job that they've done on the presentation of this whisky. The bottle looks rather old-fashioned. It's a very heavy bottle. For such a cheap whisky, it's got a cork rather than a conventional metal screw cap, which you find on more of the cheaper whiskies. And the bottle has got embossed in it, "Believe it is in our nature to explore, to reach out into the unknown." And that's a direct quote from Ernest Shackleton. I'm just going to pour a glass here in my Glencairn glass. Glencairn, which is branded with the Penderyn name, Penderyn being a very, very good Welsh whisky. So let's just pour the glass there while I fill up this pipe, and then I'll tell you a little bit about how this whisky came to be. And it really is an interesting story. So that's the pipe filled up a minute. Just set it to one side. Now, in my book, A Dark History of Whisky, page 144, in the second miscellaneous section, as I said, the first chapter that contains miscellaneous information, miscellaneous stories, is called A Whisky Mixer, and this second is called A Double Whisky Mixer. On the nose, Shackleton gives us ethanol. This is only 40% ABV, but it's still, you get that ethanol aroma. Maybe a little smoke. But let's tell you the story behind Shackleton's whisky. Now, born in Kilkay, County Kildare, Ireland in 1874, but raised in London, Ernest Shackleton was a famed polar explorer who is still, even today, talked about in awe. It was on one of his many expeditions, a failed attempt to reach the South Pole, that he left behind something that would turn out to be a gift to future whisky enthusiasts around the world. When Shackleton and his team were forced to abandon their Antarctic camp and return home in 1909, they left behind 3 cases of whisky that would be recovered from the ice more than a century later. And thanks to this find and the expertise of modern blenders, there is now a blended malt Scotch whisky on sale called Shackleton's. A selling point of this whisky is that it is as close as possible a record Shackleton and his team carried with them on the British Antarctic expedition all those years ago. Now, during this expedition, Shackleton and his team had reached a point where they were only 97 geographical miles short of their target of reaching the South Pole, but they were forced to turn back because of dwindling supplies and worsening weather conditions. And Shackleton he had a very difficult decision to make. He could either continue onwards and risk his men's life, or call the whole thing off when they were so close to reaching their target. But of course this meant that his men would survive, and Shackleton was a leader who cared very much about his men, and so he turned back. Now let's flash forward to 2010. A team of conservationists from New Zealand, and again I'm reading directly from the book, a team of conservationists from New Zealand's Antarctic Trust found 3 cases of McKinley's whisky that had been left behind when the Nimrod expedition had to abandon their camp in the Antarctic. The whisky has spent more than 100 years in the ice, but due to its high alcohol content, it had not actually frozen, and within the bottles it sloshed around like a regular whisky. The conservationists reached out to White & Mackay, the present-day owners of the McKinley brand, and in 2011 a private jet flew several bottles from Christchurch, New Zealand to Scotland for careful analysis. Would the whisky be safe to drink? Although whisky only ages within the barrel, this was truly aged whisky. It had been bottled at 15 years old, so actually it was still 15 years old, and yet it had spent more than 100 years in a frozen wasteland. So it was in essence a 15-year-old whisky in 100-year-old bottles. Now, what happened was that Richard Patterson, who was very well known in whisky circles because he is the master blender of the Dalmore, White & Mackay, he managed to get a bottle of this extremely rare, precious whisky, and he wasn't allowed to damage the bottle at all, and so they had to put a syringe through the cork and drain out the merest amount of this whisky, this McKinley's Old Rare Island Malt. And by a careful analysis, they were able to work out what the component whiskies were that went in to make this blend. And thus, through the magic of whisky blending, which truly is magic and alchemy, they were able to recreate this whisky. Not exactly the same, obviously, because they were not going to get the exact same malts that they were used back in the day, but they got as near as damn it. And they created several bottles, and it went for an absolute fortune. But what Richard Patterson then and his team at White & Mackay did was they recreated McKinley's Old Red within affordable bottles. This retails at around £20-25, and it's nice to think that you were drinking a whisky that Ernest Shackleton and his brave men of the Nimrod expedition would recognise were you to pour them a dram. But let's take this to the palate. Once more on the nose. Ethanol, some smoke, and perhaps a bit of fruit. That's very smooth. It's got a burn as it goes down. Do you know, I'm getting something on the back end of this which reminds me of those little Parma Violet sweets we used to have as kids. So I'm going to fire up this pipe of swamp flower a moment, which, as I say, is very heavy on Perique, so it's not for the weak-hearted, the faint-hearted. It's also got some flame-cured Virginia in here. That's a strong tobacco in terms of taste. You know, I enjoy my pipe, as do many other people around the world. And the anti-smoking hysteria now, where they've lumped in pipe tobacco, cigars, but when pipe smokers don't really inhale the tobacco, there's no additives in it as there are with cigarettes, mass market cigarettes, but yet they've lumped it all in with cigarettes, the oldest form of smoking known to man, and they're trying to completely do away with it. It does make me angry sometimes. You know, it's because of the draconian legislation that we can't actually buy this ready blended anymore. And GQ tobaccos don't even sell the component parts anymore in order to blend it yourself. At least they didn't last time I looked on the website, which is such a shame because it is a fantastic tobacco. There's something relaxing about smoking a pipe. Now let's go back to the whiskey though, which is the main point of this review. It's the reason I'm plugging my book, A Dark History of Whisky by Gary Dobbs. Got to get that in there as much as you wanted to, because you know, the thing about being a writer these days is you've got to be a marketer. This is the reason that I do these videos. Well, it's not really. I do enjoy doing the videos, and it's great to grow a channel and get comments from people, like-minded people, and I get a bit of conversation and a dialogue going. That's great. It's lovely to see the thumbs up on the videos, and it's great to see people subscribe to my channel, so think ahead. But you know, you've really got to market your product out there on the same. We're going to take it one spot of the palate, and then I'm going to add a little bit of water to break this up. So, to the nose, as I say, the ethanol seems to have burnt off now. I'm not getting so much of that. I'm getting a biscuity, oaty, some smoke, and a fruity taste, which I can't quite put my finger on, but it's still giving me that Parma Violet vibe on the back. I'm just going to put a little water. Not much, just a capful to break it up and allow the water to do its thing. And while it does, I'll have another puff on this fantastic swamp flower tobacco. The tobacco is very earthy. The Perique is front forward in this, as you'd expect. Perique is a spice tobacco, and it tends to overpower most other tobaccos used in any blend. But I do like Perique. I also love this old Peterson pipe. It was green. You can see some of the green still underneath, but it was a green pipe, but the dye, the whatever they used to stain this pipe has worn off. And it's revealing beneath a brown stain, which I find far more appealing than the green that it was. So now the water's done its thing with this whiskey, so we'll give it another try. Colour is quite light. It doesn't say if it's chill filtered or if it's got any colourings, but from the lightness of it, I give it the benefit of the doubt that no colourings have been used. It's a kind of straw coloured. The water now should have done its thing, but the ethanol had already burnt off anyway, so I'm not getting ethanol now. I'm getting that oaty, it's tasty whiskey. So let's take it to the nose, to the palate rather. Oats, some fruit, perhaps dark fruits. Yeah, dark fruits. It's a tasty whiskey. Shackleton's blended malt Scotch whiskey, based on an antique blend of McKinley's rare Old Island malt whiskey. Lovely presentation in the bottle. As I say, it's an heavy bottle, but it does look vintage, doesn't it? It does look like it's come far back from the mists of time, which is the vibe they're trying to get with that. So top marks to White and Mackay for that. The liquid itself is rather beautiful. You don't need to pay a fortune to get a decent whiskey. That is a damn good dram. And the swamp flower tobacco. Well, what can I say? It's quite spectacular. Okay, so that's Swamp Flower Blend from GQ Tobaccos. Shackleton's blended malt whiskey in the shops now. Not expensive. Comes in a rather handsome old style bottle with an actual cork, which is a rarity for the whiskey in this price range rather than a screw cap. And of course my book, A Dark History of Whiskey by Gary Dobbs, a whiskey book like no other. Now stick that in your pipe and smoke it. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, give me a thumbs up and leave a comment. Thank you, bye.